George Harrison always carried the reputation of being the quiet, almost solitary figure within the Beatles. On stage, the four members presented themselves as a united force, but behind the scenes, the songwriting hierarchy was far less balanced. John Lennon and Paul McCartney were the established songwriting partnership, and Harrison's growing abilities were often pushed into the background. Even when he remained diplomatic about his contributions, there was a lingering sense that Harrison never received all the credit he felt he deserved for helping shape some of the Beatles' most important songs. Unlike John Lennon and Paul McCartney, Harrison was discovering his identity as a songwriter while the Beatles were already becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. Lennon and McCartney had spent years writing together and refining their craft before Beatlemania arrived. Harrison, by comparison, was learning on the job. His first serious attempt was Don't Bother Me, written for the group's 1963 album, With the Beatles. Harrison later admitted that the finished recording did not quite match the song he heard in his head. Still, it marked an important turning point. He was no longer simply the Beatles' lead guitarist, he was beginning to establish himself as a songwriter in his own right. And even before Harrison had fully developed as a writer, his guitar work was already playing a crucial role in bringing some of the group's early songs to life. Take And I Love Her. The basic chord structure may have come from Lennon and McCartney, but Harrison's delicate nylon string guitar figure gives the song much of its character. His contribution may not have appeared in the songwriting credits, but musically, it was impossible to overlook. That was part of the complicated dynamic inside the Beatles. Harrison was not working in isolation, and the other members often helped him develop his ideas. Lennon, in particular, could be surprisingly supportive of Harrison's songwriting. He contributed ideas and suggestions to songs such as Taxman, while Harrison later recalled Lennon providing the line about the mind being able to blow clouds away for all things must pass. Their relationship was complicated, but there was genuine musical respect beneath the rivalry. Once the Beatles finally dissolved, however, old frustrations began to resurface. Lennon became irritated that Harrison did not always acknowledge the contributions he had made to songs such as Taxman, but Harrison had his own list of grievances. If Lennon believed he deserved more recognition, Harrison could point to several Beatles songs where he felt his own contributions had quietly gone uncredited. Years later, Harrison addressed the issue directly, explaining,
"Was that I also didn't say how I wrote 2 lines to Come Together or 3 lines to Eleanor Rigby. I wasn't getting into any of that."
He then added that when everything was considered, he believed he had more reasons to be annoyed with Lennon than Lennon had with him. That was perhaps the real frustration behind Harrison's complaints about the Beatles. He was not necessarily demanding that every guitar part, lyric suggestion, or passing idea receive an official songwriting credit. Instead, he had spent years being treated as the junior member of the group while quietly helping shape songs that would eventually become part of the foundation of popular music. And by the time those arguments became history, Harrison had already proven that he was capable of creating masterpieces of his own. Something, and Here Comes the Sun, made it impossible to dismiss him as merely the guitarist who happened to be in the room. That is why his claims about smaller contributions are so fascinating. Come Together remains unmistakably associated with Lennon, and it would be difficult to argue that Harrison was the primary creative force behind the song. But Eleanor Rigby is a more complicated case. Various members of the Beatles contributed ideas to its development, and Harrison later believed that some of its lines carried elements of his own thinking. There were also ideas involving Father Mackenzie that came from Ringo Starr, including the image of the lonely priest putting on his socks at night. Yet the song's deeper questions about loneliness and where all the lonely people come from can certainly be viewed through the kind of introspective lens that Harrison would increasingly explore in his own work. In the end, however, the Beatles succeeded because 4 very different musicians brought different talents into the same room. And perhaps that was Harrison's point all along. He didn't need his name attached to every note he played or every line he suggested, but after years being overshadowed by Lennon and McCartney, it was understandable that he sometimes wanted people to remember that George Harrison was contributing far more to the Beatles songs than the official songwriting credits suggested.